Here's something that might surprise you. In Narok County, Kenya, a place you probably know for its, well, incredible landscapes, livestock isn't just, around. It's basically the economic engine room.
Yeah, it really is. We're talking huge numbers, right?
Yeah.
Something like 1.3 million animals.
Exactly, 1.3 million. And get this, beef cattle make up about 75% of that, a solid three-quarters.
Wow.
So today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating effort to kind of reshape livestock farming there in Narok.
And we're focusing specifically on the work of an organization called Imfuyo and their partners, looking at their approach.
That's right. And our mission for you today is to really understand how this multifaceted program is trying to, well, formalize, finance, and ultimately, boost the livelihoods of the farmers who really depend on this huge livestock sector.
So we'll be unpacking things like community education, how they're using data, insurance,
Mm.
finance, all within that specific Narok context, using materials like their summaries, field notes, recommendations.
Exactly. Should be interesting.
Definitely. So that sheer number, 1.3 million livestock, mostly beef cattle, it just hammers home how vital this is economically.
It really does. For so many families there, these animals are like their main asset, a store of value, a safety net.
But the sources point out a big challenge. The whole system is pretty informal, isn't it?
Yeah,
Kind of underfunded, underrecorded.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where Imfuyo comes in. Their goal seems to be bringing some structure, some financial tools, future-proofing things, really.
And crucially, by focusing directly on the farmers themselves, recognizing the economic power that's already there in the livestock and trying to amplify it.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. Pillar number 1, community-based education, or CBE.
Right. The sources talk about training sessions they ran.
Yeah, covering really essential stuff: animal health, nutrition, sustainable farming practices, even basic record keeping. How to actually manage the livestock logistically.
And it wasn't just lectures, apparently. More hands-on.
Exactly. Very practical, participatory, and they worked with Narok's health department and other local groups.
Which is smart. That local partnership builds trust and relevance.
For sure. And the aim was pretty clear: give farmers actual usable knowledge and, maybe just as importantly, the confidence to make changes and plan for the longer term.
That focus on actionable knowledge really stands out. Stuff they can use, like tomorrow on their farms.
Yeah. And the record-keeping part seems key too, right? For actually starting to formalize things.
Absolutely foundational.
Yeah.
It helps the farmers themselves make better decisions, and it's the first step towards accessing other services later.
Okay, so pillar 2 was data collection and livestock profiling. This sounds interesting.
Yeah, this involved ear identification protocols, basically tagging the animals.
Tagging individual animals.
Precisely, giving each one a unique ID.
Yeah.
And apparently the tags were designed carefully to preserve the quality of the hide.
Oh, interesting. So thinking ahead about potential leather value chains.
It seems like it. A longer-term view. And alongside the tagging, farmers started using simple data logs.
Like just noting down key events.
Yeah, basic things. Births, weights, any health issues, sales, stuff like that.
And the point wasn't just, collecting data for data's sake.
No, not at all. The crucial insight here, I think, is that this builds a baseline data set for each animal.
Which then opens doors for other things.
Exactly. Things like value-based credit scoring. Can we lend against the actual value of these tracked animals? Also makes enrolling in insurance easier, helps cooperatives plan better. It turns an informal asset into something more quantifiable.
Right, moving from just counting heads to actually understanding the value and history of each animal. That seems like a huge shift.
It's fundamental. It's the lever that potentially unlocks finance and better risk management. That term value chains you mentioned, it's about the whole process, from farm to finished product, potentially letting farmers capture more economic benefit down the line.
Makes sense. Okay, third pillar, livestock insurance integration.
Right, so Imfuyo partnered with Pacific insurance brokers on this one.
And they introduced insurance policies specifically designed for the risks these farmers face, like drought and disease.
Exactly. Tailored products. But a big part of it was also just education.
Educating farmers on how insurance even works.
Yeah, like how do you make a claim? What's this cost-sharing thing? And trying to address, common worries or myths about insurance.
But the sources also mentioned it wasn't exactly smooth sailing. There were hurdles.
Definitely. They noted low awareness initially, also some historical distrust of these kinds of systems, and affordability was a big one too.
Which, as the source says, kind of signals that maybe the policy design needs deeper thinking or engagement.
Precisely. It raises big questions about trust and access. Insurance is vital, especially with climate change, making things like drought more frequent. But farmers have to understand it, trust it, and be able to afford it.
So the low uptake wasn't just about not knowing, it was deeper than that.
Right. The real insight isn't just that uptake was low, but why. It shows success depends on really building that trust and making sure the product actually works financially for the farmers.
You mentioned distrust. Did the sources say what specifically they were wary about? Was it about getting payouts?
Yeah, that came up. Skepticism about whether payouts would actually happen when needed, maybe based on, bad experiences with other programs in the past.
And the cost thing, too, I imagine. Just another expense they feel they can't handle, especially if times are tough already.
Exactly right. Which really underlines the need for more than just education. It points towards needing confidence-building measures, maybe transparent processes, maybe exploring things like subsidies for first-timers or even bundled products.
Bundled products, like what?
Maybe combining insurance with, say, essential veterinary services,
Yeah.
something that adds immediate tangible value and makes the insurance feel less like just a cost.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, Pillar 4, livestock-backed loans and agri-finance.
So here, Imfuyo was talking with banks, like Cooperative Bank, and also microfinance players.
Exploring the idea of using the livestock itself as collateral for loans, asset-based lending.
Exactly that, the
Yeah.
core idea. And the discussions focused on designing loan products that actually fit how farmers earn money, the seasonal cash flows.
Because farming income isn't like a regular monthly paycheck.
Not at all. A farmer might have significant wealth tied up in their animals, but it's not liquid cash. So loans need to reflect that reality. They also talk about risk-sharing frameworks.
Meaning ways for the banks and maybe the county government to share the risk involved in lending to farmers.
Right. Spreading the risk could make financial institutions more willing to lend.
And what was the vibe from the farmers on this? Were they interested?
Apparently, yes. The sources noted real interest in structured finance, but, and this is a big but, only if the terms were realistic, if they aligned with their production cycles and cash flow realities.
That makes total sense. You can't have loan repayments due when there's no income coming in.
Precisely. That mismatch is often why traditional finance doesn't work well for agriculture. The willingness from farmers shows there's demand, if the products are designed right.
Did the sources mention any specific farmer reactions?
Yeah, there was one anecdote mentioned about a farmer who was initially hesitant, skeptical, but the idea of using their own cattle, something they know inside out, as a way to get capital for, say, buying better feed, that really resonated. It felt tangible.
Interesting. Okay, so stepping back, the sources also had some general observations from the field. What was the main takeaway there?
I think the big one was just the sheer enthusiasm from farmers. Despite all the challenges of rolling these things out, there was this consistent appetite for growth, for more organized systems, for support.
So it wasn't like they were resistant to change.
Not according to these observations. It really highlights that the potential is there, the motivation is there, if the approach is right.
Which kind of challenges that stereotype you sometimes hear about rural communities resisting new ideas, doesn't it?
It really does. That inherent motivation is a powerful foundation to build on.
All right, finally, let's look at the strategic recommendations that came out of this work. What are they suggesting for the future?
Well, they laid out a few key areas. First, scaling up that community-based education, making it more widespread across different counties.
How? By partnering more?
Yeah, working through county extension offices, partnering with trusted local NGOs, basically institutionalizing farmer education.
Okay, makes sense. What else?
Developing proper county-level livestock databases, starting with those ear tags we talked about.
Right, the foundation.
And linking that data to mobile platforms, integrating it with vets, finance providers, cooperatives, creating a connected system.
So leveraging technology to bring it all together.
Exactly. Then for insurance, they recommend de-risking it for first-time users.
How do you de-risk insurance?
Through things like initial subsidies, those bundled products we mentioned, insurance plus vet services, for example, or maybe even hybrid models where donors help cover some of the initial risk.
Trying to overcome that initial hurdle of cost and distrust.
Precisely. And for finance, the recommendation is to design specific livestock-backed credit frameworks, using that verified livestock data as the basis for collateral.
Building on the data pillar.
Right. And potentially anchoring these frameworks with guarantees from farmer cooperatives or maybe even the county government to further reduce risk for lenders.
Okay. And the last recommendation.
Strengthening the farmer cooperatives themselves, making them key hubs for accessing finance, for getting training, and even for things like aggregating livestock for market access. give them more power.
So if you tie all those recommendations together, it sounds like a pretty comprehensive roadmap, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
Localizing education, building data systems, tackling insurance barriers, designing the right credit products, and empowering farmer groups collectively. It covers a lot of ground.
So to kind of wrap up our deep dive here, the big message from Imfuyo's work in Narok seems to be that, look, rural livestock farmers aren't against structure or new ideas. They're actually receptive, provided they're engaged in the right way.
Yeah, thoughtfully and appropriately. And the things that made this promising seem to be uh, getting the right partnerships in place, making
Hmm.
the education really practical and hands-on, and using data as a tool to unlock new opportunities.
And Imfuyo's plan is to keep expanding this model, right? Taking it to other counties, aiming to transform these local livestock economies sort of from the ground up.
Connecting knowledge, data, and finance, that seems to be the core formula they're working with.
Okay, so here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over. We've seen how this community-led, data-driven approach worked in the context of livestock in Narok.
So the question is, how could similar approaches tailored, of course, to local needs be applied elsewhere, to other sectors that are traditionally informal?
Could we see models like this empowering individuals and transforming local economies in, say, small-scale fisheries or artisan crafts or other areas entirely? Something to think about.